So this is the Mizuno Alpha III, which makes a brave change by giving it an update less than a year after the Alpha II came out. So in today's video, I'll tell you what the Alpha III does well, and also not so well, to ultimately let you know if this is still the king of speed boots or not. As always, I'm J-Mike, and this is my review of the Mizuno Alpha III Japan. So a brave change, huh? Well, Mizuno has ditched the sandwich foam cage and textile mesh upper and gone for a knit upper instead to give you an even closer, more personal fit. And the fit is still, as always with Mizuno, I want to say, absolutely world class, which is mostly down to Mizuno's engineered Fit Last Neo. Now, the last is this plastic or wooden foot shape that the boot is built around. And in my book, this last is just the best there is. Period. Now, the upper itself has actually gotten quite a lot softer than the Alpha II out of the box and reminds me a little bit in how it feels off the Alpha I, but might actually still be a little bit softer even. It's got that very pliable, deformable knit feel, and if I'm also being honest, there is a little bit of that like floppy plastic rigidity to it as well. But the beautiful thing is that it only took me around 30 minutes of wearing the boots for the upper to soften up really nicely and just move very, very well with and around my foot. And in that regard, I think this upper is a lot better than a lot of the other thin textile mesh knit uppers out there, because it does make me feel a little bit like floppy initially, but it softens up so well very quickly. I was a little bit worried, but no. It's not a problem. And that's impressive because it somehow manages to both stay soft and adaptive and still somehow also maintain its structural integrity. Now, if you look at the boot like the Furon V8, it has this really thin hypo-knit upper that is stupidly soft and a very nice upper, but it also doesn't have the most structure in the world. And that for me is where Mizuno kind of hit the sweet spot with the Alpha III, where it is really nice and pliable, it molds very well around the foot, gets this personal, very close feel, and yet it still manages, because of this stitched cage that acts like a skeleton, to really lock the foot nicely inside the boot. So that soft upper, plus the amazing shape from the last, plus the secure locked-in sensation, just equals an absolutely outrageously good fit. And that's the kind of math I can understand. And another one of the reasons that the fit is so otherworldly good is the heel, where Mizuno actually made a change that I initially thought would be a little bit of a mistake. Because out has gone the Zero Glide liner, this slightly sticky liner that really eliminated a lot of slippage in the heel. And in has instead come an admittedly really nice suede liner. But I'll talk about that in a second, because the shape of the heel, to me, is still one of the absolute best in the game. Because it just feels like it's actually made for the anatomical shape of the heel, which is not what you can say about every boot out there. Anyways, it gives you just the right amount of pinch right up here. It has a relatively narrow shape, meaning that it sits close around the heel, but because you have this really lovely foam package and just enough space and enough like curvature for the heel to sit in, it also feels as if it holds the heel nicely in place, it locks it in firmly, but in a very gentle, luxurious way. And then of course there is this suede liner, which to me seems to be the same that Mizuno used on the updated Morelia 2. And if you know how awesome of a suede liner that material is. But it actually gets a little bit grippy when you start to sweat. So while it's not zero glide levels of sticky, well, it still eliminates enough of that up and down movements inside the heel, which in tandem with the shape, makes sure that the lock-in is absolutely phenomenal. And since you also still have the Zero Glide liner from like the midfoot and forward, the lockdown in the boot is just top of class. So is the Alpha III the boot with the best lock-in on the market? Yeah, I think that's a pretty easy conclusion to make. Which is not what you can say about every boot on the market. Puma. But blah, 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 blah. Size-wise, the Alpha III is very, very similar to the Alpha I and II in the sense that you can feel that they're made for Japanese and Asian feet that are typically a little bit flatter and wider in the midfoot compared to at least European feet. Now, what I also really like here is that you have such a nice height and amount of volume in the toe box, which means that you get enough room to feel that your toes, they're comfortable and they're not being squeezed, but also the upper sits close enough to make it feel sleek and closely connected to the foot. The forefoot here has a decent amount of width, and you'll also get a nice and adaptive midfoot.
And while it might not be as adjustable now that you have the knit tongue versus the floating tongues that you saw on the Alpha 1 and 2, it will still be relatively solid for most foot shapes, even wider feet in my book. Now, what's also really nice is that, to me at least, the length, well, to be fair, it's still kind of stuck in between two sizes, just like the Alpha 1 and 2, meaning that if you want it tight and really locked in, you can go down half a size, but and you will feel a lot off the boot. But personally, going true to size somehow felt a little bit more true to size than in the Alpha 2, in the sense that I just have a little bit less dead space in the toe box when going with my usual size Japan 25, UK 6. So yeah, true to size for me is the way to go, but if you like to punish your feet and just feel everything, you can do that, okay? Now, the fit in general for me is just, it's just such a nice vibe because it has that combination of feeling sleek and speedy and still very comfortable. It feels natural around your foot. And with that upper that breaks in really nicely and this improved heel, which is the update that I didn't know I desperately needed on the Alpha, is such a quintessentially Mizuno complete package. I like it a lot, to be fair.
However, the fit is one thing, but the touch is also important.
And in that sense, it feels quite a lot like the Alpha 1 and 2, if I'm honest. Because it's close, it's sharp, and it has this almost barefoot-like sensation where there's just enough material in between the foot and the ball to take away the worst sting, but also it fits close enough to make you feel fully connected. Now, as for the feel of the upper, it has this almost, should we call it, gloss-like waxy sensation. It's a little bit tacky, and yes, there is a little bit of texture from the knit, but overall it is a relatively smooth plain surface, meaning that it's just you and the ball. And since that foam cage from the Alpha 1 and 2 is gone, it's just a relatively straightforward sensation. In other words, it's honest. It's just sharp on the ball, but because it fits so well and sits so close to the foot, it gives me the feeling of confidence that is just slightly elevating that barefoot feel. And I just found myself constantly wanting the ball, doing something with it. That's a really nice feeling.
The outsole, yeah, it's the same. Again.
And normally, honestly, that is something I would criticize. And I mean, it would have been nice with a new, cool, funky plate. But then again, if you have one of, if not the best outsole on a speed boot, then why change? And it appears Mizuno have thought the same way. So you still have this outsole where there's a Carvo RS board under the forefoot here, which is a lot like carbon fiber in the sense that it's really stiff, meaning that you get this very responsive, aggressive sensation, almost like springy sensation as you bend your foot and push off. But it's just flexible enough for it to not feel like a hindrance of bending your foot either. So that's pretty nice. And with a relatively stable midfoot and these triangular studs that offer a quite decent amount of bite in all directions. Could be more aggressive when you push off, but it is what it is. It's quite decent, and it means that the Alpha feels like this really solid base for transferring as much power into the ground as you possibly can. But I mean, an upgrade if they make an Alpha 4 in a year's time, I mean, it works, but
However, even the most meticulously engineered boot from Japan is not perfect. So let me take you through 4 annoying things that you also need to know about.
And the first one is that compared to the Alpha 2, I kind of feel like I'm missing that lace hole right there. I mean, I can punch it myself, but I just feel like I need one more lace hole here to be able to do the runner's loop like I want to do it, but also just give me the option of lacing it a little bit deeper and really lock that part of my foot down on the plate and really push it back into the heel. Honestly, that's a bit of a miss. And while this insole with the Energy XP foam that's nice and reboundy and cushy is pretty nice, I'm honestly still gonna miss the Zero Glide insole from the Alpha 2 with this non-slip treatment on the upper that worked like a charm. The funny thing is that the Energy sole is actually a little bit thicker, which is probably the reason why that the Alpha 3 fits more true to size. But still, why not just slap the old Zero Glide treatment on this as well? And I'll also be honest, I'm gonna miss the floating tongue a lot. I mean, the knit is nice enough, it does the job, but personally, I just love that freedom, that adjustability that you get with the floating tongue, and you just don't get that with the knit to the same extent. It is what it is. I don't understand why they had to, the floating tongue is so good. Rest in peace, old friend. And look, there's no beating around the bush here. It is a very expensive boot. And yes, it is the Rolls Royce. Yes, the fit hits different. And yes, the build quality is unrivaled. But over 330 euros for this is just like, yeah. And with the Elites being so good and that amazing value for money, you really gotta want the Japan quality to pay that much.
But if you and your wallet can recover from the outlay, the Alpha 3 is still an amazing boot. And in my book, an upgrade on the Alpha 2.
It does more or less everything that the Alpha 1 and 2 did well, and then improves on quite an important part of the boot in the heel. And while the upper is different, and I am going to miss my floating tongue dearly, to me the fit is just world class and in a league of its own. And with the fit, the lockdown and the outsole just working together in unison, to me the Alpha 3 is just still my favorite speed boot out there. Is that boring? Probably is, but I mean, what can I do? But guys and girls, what do you think of the Alpha 3 that comes less than a year after the Alpha 2? Let me know in the comment section right down below. Remember that you can buy it right now in the link to Unisport right over there, and subscribe to the channel with the notifications on if you haven't done so already. And with those words, I'll be signing off. Arigatou gozaimasu.